What's up everybody, Commander Sanctum here, and today we have a brand new deck tech using Neriv, Heart of the Storm. Neriv is a 4/5 spirit dragon for 1 red, white, black that has flying, and if a creature you control that entered this turn would deal damage, it deals twice that much damage instead. One of the best ways to really maximize this double damage ability, outside of hasted creatures attacking, is with enter the battlefield burn effects. That is, creatures that enter and immediately deal damage when doing so. In fact, this may likely be an even better method than attacking, since it can't really be stopped outside of counterspells. With that in mind, we'll be focusing heavily on creatures that have ETB damage abilities to try to burn our opponents out. We'll also be supplementing this with Myriad and Flicker effects to get those ETB effects as many times as possible. With that, let's get into the card highlights. To start out with, we have a number of creatures that enter and deal damage to each opponent, maximizing the efficiency of the damage doubling. Red Dragon deals a base 4 damage, and Stormcaller deals a base 2, making for a huge swing in life if paired with Neriv. Fear of Burning Alive also does 4 damage to each opponent, with the added benefit of also dealing damage to creatures whenever non-combat damage is done. While Fear's Delirium ability won't be doubled on subsequent turns after playing it, the fact that any damage done with enter effects will already be doubled from new sources means that those creatures will still effectively take double damage, making for an excellent way to deal some damage to an opponent and kill one of their creatures all in one. Continuing with the sweeping burn abilities, we have some that deal damage based on some characteristic of the battlefield. Maria's Outrider deals damage based on the number of basic land types you control. Since we're Mardu colored, this makes for a maximum base of 3 to each opponent. Sunspine Lynx also cares about number of lands, but instead is equal to the number of non-basic lands each opponent controls, making this an absolute win con later in the game. Fanatic of Mogis is all about devotion to red, which, in a burn-based deck all about creatures with ETBs, can be quite high due to red being the best burn color out there. For single target effects, we have Anathemancer, which does the same thing as Sunspine Lynx, but to a single opponent instead of them all. It does also have Unearth, meaning its ETB can more easily be triggered multiple times, making for an effective include. Murderous Redcap also has a built-in recursion effect in Persist, allowing you to ping multiple targets at least twice. It also pairs very well with Flicker effects, since they can effectively reset its Persist, making for a dangerous combination of damage. Bogardan Hellkite is rather expensive, but can do a whopping 10 damage divided when paired with Neriv, making for a great way to close out the game for an opponent. It even has Flash, letting you do it at instant speed if need be. For creature removal, we have Outrage Shaman, which basically has an old school version of Devotion to Red, similar to the Fanatic of Mogis. Thunder Dragon will enter and do a base 3 damage to each creature without flying, which is especially great in this deck since it can act as a creature sweeper while leaving Neriv intact. Exocrine is both a great board wipe and potential game ender, since it'll do a massive amount of damage to all creatures and players, depending on how much mana you pump into it. There are also a few enchantments that act almost as additional creature ETBs. Due to the way they're worded, they will trigger Neriv's double damage ability whenever a creature enters, since they specifically state the creature is what does the damage, not the enchantment. Warstorm Surge and Pandemonium both let you deal damage to any target based on the entering creature's power, which will in turn be doubled by Neriv, making for some great supplemental damage alongside their own ETB effects. You do have to be careful with Pandemonium, however, since it affects all players' creatures. If your opponents play big enough creatures, they may be able to continually kill Neriv with it, stymieing your game plan. Since we have access to white, we can try to maximize our enter triggers with Flicker effects. These are cards that can exile creatures you control and then return them to the battlefield, either immediately or at the next end step. Ghostway and Eerie Interlude are both examples that do just that and return them at the next end step, letting you both re-trigger the creature's enter effects and potentially saving them from an opponent's mass removal spell. Another round returns the creatures immediately, but lets you flicker multiple times depending on how much mana you cast it for. If you have enough creatures with ETB effects and can pump enough mana into this spell, this can be a very easy way to close out the game on the spot. Beyond flickers, we can also use Myriad to maximize our creatures' enter abilities. Since Myriad creates token copies of creatures in combat, all those tokens will enter and do their effect, while also being doubled by Nerev's ability since they just entered that turn. Blade of Selves is a cost-effective way to give a single creature Myriad, while Legion Loyalty gives all your creatures Myriad, again, likely ending the game on the spot if you have enough of them. Elturel Survivors doesn't give other creatures Myriad, instead having it itself, but makes for another great finisher late in the game, or against an opponent who is ramped hard. Duke Alder Ravenguard and Ironwolf Forger have a similar effect, giving a single creature Myriad at the beginning of combat, with the Duke being slightly better since it also gives the creature haste. Still, we want to maximize our enter triggers more than anything else, making both of these effects absolutely critical in doing so. While enter effects are our main way of burning out our opponents, having a backup plan is never a bad thing. Giving those creatures haste to attack, and thus deal double combat damage thanks to Neriv, is a good way to go about doing so. Enduring Courage and Ogre Battle Driver both do the same thing, giving a creature +2/+0 and haste when they enter, allowing them to attack immediately. These cards are especially great thanks to the power boost. Not only will their combat damage be further increased thanks to the boost being doubled, they also work very well with the two enchantments, Warstorm Surge and Pandemonium, since the triggers can be stacked so the power boost occurs before the creature's power is calculated for damage. Nahiri's Resolve gives all creatures haste and a permanent +1/+0 boost, but really shines in its second ability, which acts as an additional flicker effect for your entire board. It is important to note, however, that this one returns them at your next upkeep, meaning you may be completely open to attack if you choose all your creatures until your next turn. We also have a few utility cards that work well with our overall theme of doubling damage. Cauldron of Souls is a great card to use against a board wipe, since it'll let you give any number of creatures persist until end of turn. Similar to what we saw with Murderous Redcap, this can be a great way to both protect your board from mass removal and retrigger all of your enter effects all in one. Mardu Ascendancy is a great way to get out a bunch of attacking tokens, which will then be affected by Nerev's damage ability since they just entered during that turn. The sacrifice ability on this is a bit less useful, but who knows, it may be a way to also protect your board from one of your own damage sweepers, like Thunder Dragon, so that's something to keep in mind. Here's an example deck list utilizing all the previously mentioned cards. Additional cards include a ton more enter damage effects like Foundry Champion and Grasping Throw, some much needed land ramp in Oreskos Explorer and Solemn Simulacrum, and a suite of what Mardu does best, removal, in Chandra's Ignition and Ruinous Ultimatum. Any sort of Panharmonicon type of effect, where an effect is doubled under certain circumstances, is always going to be powerful, but I feel like Nerev's is going to be especially good. There's so many ways to abuse a double damage effect from creatures that just entered the battlefield. You can do haste, you can do creatures entered, tapped, and attacking, you can use the new mechanic from Tarkir Dragonstorm and mobilize, or, like in this deck tech, you can simply use creatures that deal damage with an ETB trigger. Honestly, I think this is going to be the best way to make a Nerev deck. Sure, haste is pretty good, especially when you pair it with ball lightning type effects where creatures have large power and low toughness, but that type of strategy still requires you to actually hit your opponent in combat. With this strategy, you simply need to cast the creature and all the work will be done for you. Same with Myriad. Yes, you need to attack to get Myriad to trigger, but since we're all about creatures that enter and do damage, that's all we need to do. Myriad in particular will require you to make some smart choices in who you attack, since you want to make sure the real creature stays alive to attack again on another turn, but outside of that, it's a pretty simple yet effective strategy. Neriv himself is likely to draw a lot of hate and attention, since it'll be so easy to just burn someone out of the game quickly, so that's one thing to keep in mind when playing such a deck. Though, even without Neriv, you can still pump out a ton of damage with these creatures and effects. It'll be less efficient, absolutely, but it is still doable. Mardu's even great at controlling the board with its outstanding removal options, and even has some of the best card draw out there, making it a color combination that can really turn the entire game to your advantage. Honestly, I think a deck like this, or even just Neriv in general, is going to be a pretty strong contender in any casual Commander game. So if that's something that interests you, or if you just love to burn out your opponents, try out this deck. I think you'll be pleasantly surprised at how well it can work. I hope you enjoyed watching this deck tech on Neriv Heart of the Storm. The full deck list outlined in this video can be found at the Architect link at the top of the description. If you enjoyed this video, please remember to drop a like and comment, as well as subscribe to the channel for more Magic content. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.